Welcome to the Sam Acho Podcast featuring Clif Marshall, also known as Clif Notes. This is the place where we go first, we give space, and we grow hope. We talk about faith, family, football, and finance. And so we're so excited once again to have a very, very special guest.
Absolutely, Sam. I want to introduce to everyone out there listening, Eric Wood. Eric is a former professional football player who was a center for the Buffalo Bills in the National Football League. He played his college football for the Louisville Cardinals and was selected in the first round of the 2009 NFL Draft with the 28th overall pick. Eric played 9 seasons in the NFL, including a Pro Bowl appearance before retiring in 2017 due to a neck injury. Since 2019, he's been the color commentator and analyst for the Buffalo Bills radio network. Eric is a Christ follower, a husband, and a dad who currently resides in Louisville, Kentucky. E. Wood, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Hey, it's an honor to be on. I'm a fan of this podcast. I've reached out to you guys before, giving you some feedback and some positive encouragement after episodes that you've had in the past. So it's an honor to be on with you guys. Love you both.
Absolutely, Eric. And I want to say we have known each other, I guess, since 2002, 2003.
Yep.
I knew you when you were a senior in high school. I was a strength and conditioning coach with the Louisville Cardinal football team, and we began recruiting you out of Cincinnati Elder. Jeff Brom, who's the head coach now at the University of Louisville, who's a great friend of mine, who was actually in my wedding. He's done many great things over the course of his coaching career at Western Kentucky, at Purdue, and now again at Louisville. But I say his greatest feat ever was finding the diamond in the rough, Eric Wood, because you didn't have a ton of offers right out of high school. So walk me through that process of kind of how you chose to be a Louisville Cardinal.
Yeah, it was easy because I only had one scholarship offer, so it became a very easy decision for me. And, you mentioned it. Jeff Brom was recruiting other guys from my high school, Elder High School in Cincinnati. We had a bunch of Division I talent. I was a tight end my junior year, switched to offensive line my senior year, and I wasn't really on the recruiting radar. I started gaining some interest my senior year, and then Jeff Brom offered me my first scholarship offer, actually after a basketball game. He came and watched me play basketball. And so to me, there was a lot of positivity around that Louisville program at the time. They had a good 2003 season. Brian Brom was the USA Today Player of the Year. He was coming in to play quarterback. They had some other nice recruits coming in. And so I'd love to say, I saw the foresight and I saw maybe early playing time or how good our offenses and teams would be. But, God made it a very easy decision for me. And look, I can get decision fatigue in life. And so for me, it was a very easy decision and ended up being an incredible one to go join the Louisville Cardinals.
Eric, what do you remember most about your time at Louisville, and why did you decide to call that place home?
Yeah, honestly, from the day that I got to Louisville, this city just embraced me, whether it was Tom Jurich, the athletic director at the time, the coaching staff, people around the community. I had a great group of friends that didn't play football. Met him through our long snapper at the time who was from Louisville, so I got to be good buddies with him and a lot of his friends. So I had a friend base outside of the football program. That's actually the group of friends that I met my wife through, my college girlfriend who's now my wife. So got to meet her through that kind of friend group that I still remain friends with to this day. And so to me, I'm from the west side of Cincinnati. Where we live in Louisville is a little bit different from where I grew up. And look, when I got to the NFL, I asked some people, Jason Spitz included, who Clif coached as well at Louisville, played a long time in the NFL. I said, what gets guys out of the NFL the fastest? He said, you forget what got you to the NFL. So in the offseason, I would go back to Louisville and train with the college guys at least a couple days a week. Maybe, if I had, certain areas I wanted to improve on, and I'd go see, a one-on-one trainer for those. But at least twice a week throughout my entire career, I would go back and train with the Louisville Cardinals. I always say it kept me young. My wife, someone would come on the radio and I'd be singing along to like a newer hip hop song. She's like, how do you even know this? I'm like, because I train with the college guys. They keep me young. And for me, it also allowed me to build relationships with guys, to be able to mentor to guys. And, I mentioned Jason Spitz. Well, I got to be that for so many guys at Louisville because of it. And so we love Louisville. I didn't know I was going to be calling games on the radio for the Bills. When my career ended, we sold our house pretty quickly up there and moved back to Louisville. So commuting for work nowadays isn't super convenient because I'm going to home and away games for the Bills, and we live in Louisville. But this is home for us, and we love it here.
Well, part of living in Louisville, Kentucky, Eric, is you get to be a part of the Kentucky Derby. So talk to me about that, and how many consecutive Kentucky Derbies have you been to?
I'd say probably 15 or 16. I mean, we went in college, but I wouldn't even really call that going to the Derby. I don't even know if I ever even placed a bet on a horse in college. Now, I didn't know anything about horse racing at the time. I didn't have any money. And, we're out in the infield with, the masses, I'll say. So waiting in line to place a bet, you can't do it on your phone nowadays like you can now back then. And so the Kentucky Derby special, though, we love bringing people to Louisville, showing off the city, what they've done with Churchill Downs. Bill Mudd, the president of Churchill Downs Inc., is a good friend of ours. And so what they've done at Churchill has been incredible. It's an incredible experience. I always say it's the best sporting event to bring your wife to because there's no competing teams. So it's not like walking into a football game where if you're wearing Steelers, if you're a Steelers fan, you're wearing a jersey and you're in Cincinnati, someone's going to cuss at you. You're just complimenting outfits. Hey, who you like on this next race? You're all there to, place a few bets, have fun, connect with people. The wives like to show off with the hats and the dresses, do the red carpet. And so it's fun for us to bring other couples in each year for it. And, each year gets more fun than the last, in my opinion.
That's so good. Eric, you were a first-round pick and an NFL Pro Bowler. Clif mentioned about some of the opportunities of only having one college offer. When did you know you could play at the highest level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll say this, I used to run a podcast called What's Next with Eric Wood. When my career ended, I was trying to figure out what's next for me. And so people from a variety of industries, we did over 200 episodes, and I got to pick people's brains that are just successful in life, people that I admired. And that doesn't necessarily mean financial success necessarily. A lot of times it comes with it, but it's everybody from pastors to big-time businessmen and women to NFL owners to coaches, to players, whoever it may be, guys I looked up to and I just wanted to learn from. And it stood out to me that someone at some point gave them the confidence to either take that risk to go all in, that gave them the confidence to say, hey, I belong in this room, that I deserve to be in this position. For me, that moment came. I made the freshman All-American team my redshirt freshman year playing center. And look, I mean, I played between two guards that played in the NFL. We had a All-American quarterback. I was just a freshman in that role at center. Maybe I deserved it, maybe I didn't. We had a really good offense, but I got that award, and we got a note in the mail that came with the award, and it gave the breakdown of X amount of percentage of guys that are first-team freshman All-American end up being a first-round draft pick, a second-round draft pick, playing this many years in the NFL. And I framed that. That was, I was 18, 19 years old, and I framed it at the time because I wanted to keep it. I wanted to save it. And to me, that put confidence in me to say, hey, I can go all in. I came to the University of Louisville with one goal and make sure they got a good return on their investment, whether that was me, practicing hard, working out in the weight room hard, or if that was going to be a star on the field. I wasn't sure, but I was going to go in there and work my tail off because that was my only opportunity. And I know you weren't, at the time, you weren't getting cut in college like you kind of can now with the NIL and all that. But at the time, I was just trying to find a role within the team. And so that note that I got from rivals.com, I guess, it gave me the confidence to say, oh, I got a shot in this league. And if I go all in, I might one day be able to be a first-round draft pick. That year, Nick Mangold got drafted in the first round as a center, and I thought, okay, there's only going to be one potentially. Now, my year there was two, me and Alex Mack, but there might only be one because there was only one that year in the first round, and that became my goal. I became obsessed with it, and it really drove me to say, okay, I can go out and change the trajectory of my family maybe financially just by going out and putting in the work. And it drove me to really go out and attack each and every day to go try and be that first round draft pick, that NFL football player.
That's great, Eric. You had a heck of a career with the Buffalo Bills. And then you transition into, your role now working with the Bills. and doing media, but you're also a husband and you're also a father. Talk to me about how you manage work-life balance.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's something I ask many people that I've met throughout time. Kind of the common denominator that I've gotten advice on is, look, there's going to be different seasons of life. You know, the fall for me is a lot busier work-wise than the off season is, but wherever you're at, be all in there. Whether it's with your family, be all in with them. If you're at work, be all in there, because it's not likely going to be a perfect 50-50 balance, or I'm going to be, 80-20 at home. I don't know how that looks based upon the season of life that we're in, or the season, of the year that we're in, that determines what that work looks like. But, when I'm home, am I taking the kids to school? Yes. Can I, if I'm able to, yes, I want to be able to do that. And so, obviously I'm blessed to just have a completely supportive wife that when I get out of the NFL, she goes and lets me chase my next dream in broadcasting. And, she understands it's good for my soul to be around the Bills organization and to go travel and call games. Now I try and bring them along with me as much as I can, and school and sports is getting more and more in the way of that now than it was maybe a few years ago, when we'd look at the offseason or the schedule for the Bills that year and say, what are the best away trips that we can bring the family to? Where could we sneak in a vacation? That's getting harder and harder to do. But, my wife is so supportive, and, she never makes me feel guilty those times where, we got a long road trip and then I got to stay and do an appearance for the Bills. I never catch any grief. But then that also makes me want to go all in on the back end when I come back home, because I'm not catching grief in those moments. So, I know that's a, kind of a long-winded answer to say my advice would be, wherever you're at, be all in. And then just understand, when you feel that angst, maybe you've been gone too long, maybe the Holy Spirit's trying to tell you something that, as you continue to learn those seasons and those rhythms, maybe, okay, as we schedule out the next one, we try and figure out something where maybe I'm not gone as long. Because I'll tell you this, I rarely ever get angst that I'm not working enough. I generally get the angst like, man, I'm not pouring into the family enough at this time.
Eric, let's dig deeper there for a second. You played at a high level. You succeeded at a high level. You're in broadcasting media at a high level, but you talked about this angst as far as feeling like, man, family matters. Where is that from?
Honestly, it probably coming from a divorced household, to where, just deep down, you just think like, man, I don't ever want to ruin this. I don't ever want to see my kids 50% of the time. And I don't ever want to get to that spot to be where my parents were, where you only get custody of the kids so often. And I would imagine that's where it stems from. Just being completely honest, and just if I'm telling you my values and where I say I'm prioritizing my life, and that would be my faith, then my family, and then football is my job. And so, it kind of goes back to the faith, family, football, finances. And then I know it doesn't begin with an F, but I always say philanthropy as well. But it's like, okay, if that's what I'm going to say I'm about in that order, when it doesn't become that order, I know deep down that's when the Holy Spirit starts tugging on me.
Great wisdom, Eric, right there. I do want to transition and talk a little bit of football, because we have you and obviously we have Sam, both experts, both in the media, right? And both study the game like no one I know. So I want to ask you, what is your prediction first on the Buffalo Bills? And then secondly, what is your prediction on the Louisville Cardinals this year?
Well, I'll start with the Louisville Cardinals. It's harder and harder these days to stay up with these college programs. Sam, I see you on College Football Live all the time. I don't know how much prep work you got to do for those, but this is not like when I first got to ESPN, that was pre-transfers and NIL, and you kind of knew the rosters. Hey, here's who's coming back. Here's who the studs were. Well, now, okay, where's this guy even at now? Okay, I recognize that name. And so college football is getting harder and harder. I have full confidence in Jeff Brom, and they've adapted so well to this transfer NIL era, to where, they're going out, and a majority of who they're bringing in are transfers that they're working on, throughout the year to bring those guys in, to fundraise to get those guys in. So I got a lot of confidence in my Louisville Cardinals. They got a fairly favorable schedule this year as well. Prediction for them, I'll say 10-2 and probably likely just missing the playoffs based upon strength of schedule. That would be my guess. I hope somehow they can sneak in there. They got Miller Moss at quarterback this year, the transfer from USC. I'm not going to lie, I haven't seen him play a ton, but I did see him torch my Cardinals in the bowl game a couple years ago. And it's not surprising that Jeff went out and tried to go get that dude this year. As far as the Buffalo Bills goes, they've been so close these last 4 or 5 years, just barely can't get over the hump at the end, whether it's been the Chiefs or they've got knocked out by the Bengals one time in the AFC divisional round. And so part of it's staying healthy throughout the season, especially on the defensive side of the football. They've been dinged up on defense in the playoffs. So can they stay healthy? Can they put pressure on the opposing team's quarterbacks in the playoffs without bringing a blitz? That's been their Achilles heel. And so to me, they bring in Bosa this offseason. They bring in Michael Hoyt. They sign Larry Ogunjobi. They draft 3 defensive linemen in the draft in the first 4 rounds. If those guys can make an impact this year, I think this is a team that can go all the way. This is the last year in the historic Highmark Stadium. I saw Sam there last year, and it's a special place. It's going to be a fun send-off season as they moved into a brand new, beautiful facility across the street. We're right now, I mean, it is old school in Buffalo, but it's our old school. It's our, I don't want to call it a dump, but I mean, it is what it is. But it's a fun, awesome atmosphere. Friendliest people that you're going to meet in the NFL for the most part as you're going into the stadium. It looks like a big college tailgate out there. I hope we don't lose some of that with the, the cost that's going to come with getting seats at the new stadium. But it would be a storybook year to kind of ride off Highmark Stadium. Hopefully host throughout the playoffs there as well if the Bills can go out and get the 1 seed. But honestly, I think 2 biggest things for Bills this year: handle business in the regular season, control home field advantage throughout the playoffs. I think that gets them over the hump. And then can this defensive front put pressure on the quarterback in the playoffs, because that's what's knocked them out. I mean, they just simply have not been able to affect the Mahomes, the Burrows in the playoffs, and that's what's bit them.
Eric, you talked a lot about influence, right? Whether it's influencing the quarterback or maybe people who have had that stadium that's had an influence on you. I want to talk about a coach. Which coach has influenced your life the most and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, to me, my offensive line coach when I got to the University of Louisville, Mike Summers, I'll admit, I didn't realize how special he was until maybe now later in life. Then we've remained friends. And, the little lesson, you're talking about a Christian man, married still to this day to his wife, Kathy, who I absolutely adore. And they would have us over to their house. And I got to see him not only be a coach on the football field, but then how he treated his wife, how he treated his daughter, Amy. I get to see how he is with his grandkids now. And we'll go out and visit. My daughter loves horses. Michael texts me, hey, we got some foals. Bring your daughter out. Come meet these horses. And still to this day, he's pouring into me. Now, on the field, I was a sponge. I played 1 year of high school offensive line. So when I got to the University of Louisville, one of the great things, and you talk about blessings in life, you could say, well, I had no experience at O-line. Well, I had no bad habits either. And so Mike Summers could just mold me into the player that he wanted me to be. And so I really appreciated, and still to this day, the impact that he had on me and the others in that room. And then when I think about guys that, affected my career, we had an offensive line coach come to the Bills named Aaron Cromer. And he was absolutely outstanding. He had kind of I don't want to say checkered reputation coming into the Bills. He had the Jay Cutler comments when he was in Chicago. He had the incident prior to coming to the Bills with a little scuffle on the beach. But talk about a guy that really helped transform my game to the next level, kind of get out of the meathead, we're going to use all we got and we're just going to move these guys off the ball into, hey, Eric, I need you to become a technician. You're getting older, and I'm going to really teach you some techniques to transform your game. And he did. And it wasn't a coincidence. Then that's the year that I get into the Pro Bowl, Aaron Cromer's first year. And so Aaron Cromer, when we had a coaching staff change, goes out to the Rams, wins the Super Bowl with the Rams. And then Sean McDermott calls me a few years ago. And I'm glad Sean told this story, because I would never want to bring it up unless Sean told it first. And he did last year. Someone asked how he got connected to Aaron Cromer, because he's now back with the Bills. And the Bills have one of the best offensive lines in the league. And so this is actually kind of a funny story. So AFC Championship game, we have some people over our house. I get a call from Sean McDermott. I knew that they had just fired their offensive line coach. And I looked at my wife, Leslie, and I said, I think Sean's about to offer me a job. And He wasn't offering me the job. He wanted to know who I would recommend. And I said, hey, if you can get Aaron Cromer, who loves Buffalo, his family loves Buffalo, if you can get him back, that would be the ideal coach for this group. Just knowing the young guys they had, the talent that they had, and they absolutely love him up in Buffalo. So I would say Mike Summers and Aaron Cromer would be the two most influential on me. But there's so many I could name. Strength coaches, they spend so much time with the players. I think back to a Joe Ken, who I had late in my college career, who treated me like a pro. I mean, if I wasn't feeling, if something was bothering me, it wasn't a, hey, you would get tougher and push through. It was a, no, you're going to be a pro, so I'm going to treat you like a pro. And he taught me how to manage my body and maximize some strength gains. Jason Velkamp, I mean, he was there earlier in my career at Louisville. He did so much to transform my body to a Division I and future NFL center. And so there's a lot of those folks out there. Joe D'Alessandris, who passed away last year, he was with the Ravens. He was my offensive line coach earlier in my career in Buffalo. I mean, like I said, Sam, same way I'm sure with you, Cliff, you think back to the people that influence you. You hate to just name a couple because you're going to leave the people out, but man, just so fortunate to have been around so many great coaches. And I'll end with this. We had very little success throughout my time in Buffalo. We broke the longest playoff drought in all of professional sports, my last season in the NFL. But when you're that bad, we had, including interims, 7 head coaches in 9 years. And so you could say, hey, that's, terrible because there's constant turnover. Well, I also got to meet so many tremendous individuals because there were so many of those people coming through the facility every, 1.5 to 2 years. And then now I get to see those guys through broadcasting on the sidelines and catch up before games. And so, at the time where I probably didn't see it as a blessing, that's something I do see as a blessing now.
Well, Eric, you talked about some coaches that have influenced you. Is there a book that you've ever read that maybe had influence on your life as well?
The book that probably has had the biggest influence on my life actually stemmed from a Tony Dungy book that I read, and he was referencing apologetics writings. And so I had never kind of delved into that world, and so I started with The Case for Christ, which is maybe the most popular Christian apologetics book ever. And look, however you get down to it, you're going to need some type of faith to believe in what you cannot see. But I loved the Christian apologetics writings, and especially the Lee Strobel writings that he's done. And he's written a bunch of them now. I've read, I believe, them all at this point. But being able to really say, like, this happened, and this is why it happened. And, the apostles, they all died. 11 of the 12 died extremely violent deaths. And they wouldn't have done it. Like, maybe 1 or 2 of them does, but if they didn't witness it, if they didn't see it, they wouldn't have done it. In the book's great. It goes through many other examples. Case for Easter is incredible. Case for Faith. I mean, you can read them all. They're all great. But I would say The Case for Christ is probably the book that had the biggest influence kind of on my walk with Christ, which is the biggest influence in my life. And but I give Tony Dungy the credit for turning me on to that.
Eric, I'm going to transition a little bit. On this podcast, we talked about going deep. We like to kind of talk about some hardships and struggles. And so my question for you is, what's the biggest adversity that you faced in life, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been through a good amount of adversity in my life. I would say the biggest one that stands out would be having the career-ending neck injury. Before the 2017 season, I signed a contract extension with the Bills. Everyone thought we were tanking. Call me an eternal optimist, but I didn't see it. I mean, we had a lot of talent still on the team. We had just brought in Sean McDermott. We had the new ownership group in place. Brandon Beane was getting hired, or Brandon Beane had been hired. And so I had a lot of faith in those guys. And I said, I believe we can have a winner here in Buffalo. And so I signed a contract extension before the season, first contract that Brandon Beane ever gave out as an NFL GM, and play every single snap that season. We break the playoff drought. We're getting ready to draft our future quarterback in the draft, who ends up being Josh Allen. And I go to exit physicals, which every player in the NFL has to take a physical before you leave the facility for the offseason. They said, hey, let's get an MRI on your neck. You had some stingers this year. I'm like, my high school buddies had stingers. I never missed a snap the entire season. And my son's about to be born in Louisville. I need to get the heck out of here. And so they said, let's grab an MRI on your neck and you can leave. 3 days later, I'm in the hospital room waiting on my son to be born. So 50 minutes before he's born, I find out my career is over. I have a career-ending neck injury, disc and bone sitting into my spinal cord at C2, C3. And they said, look, I know you saw Ryan Shazier laying on the field. That should have been you. I don't know why it isn't based upon the MRIs, but as high as it is, you could never come back and play football. And so at that time, it's not only hard on you, it's hard on your family, it's hard on your wife. I mean, we were worried about how we were going to get a 2-week-old to the Pro Bowl, and now we're trying to figure out what are we going to do with our house in Buffalo? What does this next stage of life look like? And, you know, there was some disputes contractually with the Bills, which was tough because those are my buddies, those are my friends. You know, I thought you guys cared about me. And the second part of the question on how I got through it, I'll say this. It was my faith in God. It was the people that God had put in my life for a reason, and I didn't know exactly why. I was surrounded by such a great group of people nationally, but especially in Louisville, that could really just pour into me through that time. I was working with an executive coach at the time. 6 months. I started with him 6 months prior to my career ending, who ended up just being perfect to help me throughout that transition. I wrote a book called Tackle What's Next. It's chronicled much deeper in that book there. I honor many of the podcast guests that came on and helped me through that transition, people that poured into my life, but you guys will get a kick out of this. So our team chaplain in Buffalo, he based our entire chapel series that year around Matthew 25:7. He who builds the foundation on the rock, you know, the storms will come, the winds are going to blow, but he will not crumble because he has his foundation built on the rock. And I just kept thinking, man, this could be really valuable for somebody in here, but like life's good right now. I'm not injured. And I had dealt with injuries throughout my career. I got hurt my first 4 years in the league, went on IR twice, broke my leg again in 2016. Like, I was thinking, man, this is going to be so beneficial. And it was me. It was literally for me. I had rocks from the season because that was the theme that year. And we'd have different verses on these rocks, all kind of based back off of Matthew 25:7. And it was amazing that it was all for me. And thank God that through U of L FCA and through the people that poured in my life, that I had a foundation built on the rock that included my faith in God, but also friends and family that they lifted me up. And people came into my life and said, hey, if you want to transition into media, please let me help you out because you've been so great to me, you know, throughout your time with the Bills. And it just really helped. Was it all sunshine and rainbows? Absolutely not. Is it sunshine and rainbows now? No. I mean, I don't know if I'd still be playing at 39, but at 32, I felt as good as I did throughout my entire career. And my confidence level was so high in my game. And then at what point would I have hung it up? You know, you're on the verge of the Super Bowl each year. You get to snap to Josh Allen. And me and Josh have become pretty good buddies now. And, you know, there's times where it hurts. You see them report back to training camp this week. And I'm like, I really wish I could have had a few more of those. But you know what? Life gets better each and every year. We're at such a fun stage with a 7 and a 10-year-old now. Me and my wife are in as good of a spot as we've ever been in our relationship, and it continues to get sweeter in our marriage. And so extremely blessed to be sitting in these shoes right now. But at that time in 2017, heading into early 2018, it was difficult.
What a great testimony, Eric. And I tell you, God doesn't cause pain, but he can use pain to draw us closer to him. And you explained that through that adversity, you leaned upon your faith and you grew closer to God through that. If that was your greatest setback.
Real quick. I would get asked to speak often prior to the career-ending injury at, you know, an FCA event or a men's group at a church. And I would always say, like, my testimony's boring. You know, I got poured into by a good amount of people. I'd never necessarily had a rock bottom moment to where I came up. I didn't have that, you know, Saul to Paul transition per se. I just kind of, you know, over time I said, wait, that guy's a Christian. He's a Christian. okay, what's the common denominator here? I want to be like all these people. What's the common denominator? Okay, well, let me check this out. Let me dig deeper. Let me dive deeper. Got baptized in 2012. And after that, I have my testimony. It's like God has used that story to put me in rooms and put me around people and potentially impact so many people because of that pain that you mentioned.
Clif, can I ask one just to dive deeper? Because Eric, you kind of went back and shared about that testimony. What did you learn about the character of God during that sudden stop?
I don't know if it was the character of God, but kind of just going back to that foundation, like Chris Morgan at U of L, our FCA director, always says, in life, you're either going into a storm, in a storm, or coming out of one. If you're in a sweet spot in life, just get ready. Those storms are coming. You better have your foundation right. And I realized the importance of that much deeper. And I mentioned, coming from a divorced household, and we had some turmoil in the house as a kid. Like, one of my biggest transitions in my faith over the last probably 4 or 5 years, and some of it comes with having a son now, is I would always say that I believe God was my Lord and Savior. But when I prayed Heavenly Father over these last 4 or 5 years, it feels different now. And just like the way I see my son and the love I have for him, and understanding that God's love is so much greater and it's almost incomprehensible. But that's kind of been one of my biggest transitions in my faith journey over these last 4 or 5 years, is God is my Father and not just my Lord and Savior.
Eric, if that was your greatest adversity, the neck injury, right, that ended your career, what is your greatest victory? Because you've had some great victories too. I mean, being a first round draft pick, being a Pro Bowler, being a dad, what would you consider your greatest victory in life?
I would say career-wise, I got the nomination for Walter Payton Man of the Year twice with the Bills. And, that's not the sexiest award in the NFL. It's not, MVP of the league. But to be voted on that by your teammates, which is a character award and also a performance award, but to be that twice for the Bills, I just remember sitting there as a rookie and a young guy in the league thinking, man, I want to be just like Fred Jackson and Brian Scott and a number of those guys who had won that nomination in the past. And to get honored with that was, career-wise, probably my greatest victory, I'd say. Now, making the Pro Bowl was extra special. We didn't grow up going to Hawaii as a kid. I got to bring a bunch of people out to Hawaii with me to experience the last Pro Bowl in Hawaii that, they had never experienced Hawaii before. And to be in that setting was absolutely incredible. But honestly, I'd say my greatest victory right now is just looking around at my family and just seeing my kids and how they interact and my relationship with my wife. And look, that doesn't come without work. And we've been in a couples Bible study for we were trying to do the math the other day, I think about 12 years now, where we're getting poured into by other couples. We surround ourselves with other couples that we can learn from. We have close friends that are, our age, but I almost see them as mentors in relationships as well. But, I would just say, where I'm at as a husband and father, I would consider my greatest victory. And I give all the credit to the people that I've got to witness and learn from throughout my life to be able to make that happen.
Who are some of those people who you've learned from who have made that impact?
Yeah, so Dave and Beth Stone. So Dave Stone was the pastor at Southeast Christian Church for 19, 20 years. And so he invited me and my wife to a Bible study, a couples Bible study at their house. I believe it was 2013, right after we got married. And so we've been doing that. And, we might meet 10, 12 times a year, but super impactful. I was in a disciple development group with 7 other guys at Southeast, including Kyle Eineman, their current head pastor at Southeast. And just learning from those guys has been really special. I mentioned Chris Morgan on here a couple times, our U of L FCA director, just seeing him in college and how he interacted with his wife and how he served our team and then served his 3 girls was just beyond special. And then we just have some close friends, whether they're our age or older, where I'll say, what makes it work? How do you get to be 60 years old and you're having fun with your wife still? You have a relationship with your kids, you have a relationship with your grandkids, because you see it all the time where people don't have that. They just didn't make the investments along the way, and it becomes an estranged relationship. So, those are a few specific names, but like I said earlier, I know I'm leaving some out, and I'm remiss to not mention them by name, but those are the ones that stand out right now.
Wow, Eric, I have a great respect for Southeast Christian Church. I actually started attending that church in 2004 when I was finishing up my career at the University of Louisville, and Dave Stone was preaching there. Kyle Eidelman was his assistant at the time. And we often visit that church from time to time when I'm driving back down to Kentucky. And I know you're a part of a men's group there, as you mentioned. And one of the Bible verses that I like is Proverbs 27:17. And that says, iron sharpens iron. Can you talk about just getting plugged in at that church and in those Bible studies and how that's helped you in your walk?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you attend the fourth biggest church in the country, I don't know where the metrics are now. I know at one time it was fourth, and maybe, I know that changes each and every year. But if you're not getting in with a small group of dudes or couples, it's going to be tough to, get those personal touches each and every week. Now, you that's not taken away from anyone who doesn't attend the small groups, but I would recommend, if you're at a really big church, to get that accountability in life, you're probably going to need to get in a smaller group. We've all been in locker rooms. You get enough accountability in a locker room. You can't get away with anything in a locker room, whether it's college, NFL, whatever it may be, with a coaching staff. Someone's checking you constantly. But when you get with a small group, it allows you to dig deeper with a smaller group of guys or gals that can check you in life and say, hey, I see these blind spots in your life. And look, I've always really prided myself on being coachable, and I want to continue to be like that. Now, I mean, I love to play golf. I have a dude who gives me lessons and can tell me what's going on there. I have, I had an executive coach, a life coach per se, for a long time, 3.5 years, to try and help me in my transition and check for blind spots. I've had my own personal advisory board where I open up my finances and everything and say, hey, pick this apart. Tell me where I'm going wrong. And these are all guys that I look up to and, have the characteristics I want to be like in life. So, I just think there's tremendous value in being a part of a small group. And, even especially, people that transition from military or team sports or whatever it may be, finding that group again can be so valuable.
Wow.
You talked about, Clif, your life verse. Eric, I want to ask you, what is your life verse? What verse in the Bible has kind of emanated with you the most?
Yeah, so we have a verse that's on our wall right before you leave our garage door, Proverbs 11:25. He who refreshes others will be refreshed, and a generous person will prosper. And look, there's so much that can, stray our attention, our kids' attention on what they should be like, what they want to do. And I say, look, the Woods, we want to be joy spreaders. We want to refresh others. We are beyond blessed. And I'm not just saying like we are so blessed in our current stage of life with health and resources and where we live and all that. Like, we should be joy spreaders, and we're going to be generous. We've been given a lot, time, talent, and treasure. We're going to use it to benefit others. And so that's become our family's verse, and it was my verse personally, and then I made it our family verse too. But it just simplifies it. It's like when my daughter gets out of the car before school, I say, what are you going to make today? Best day ever. What are you going to do? Spread joy. All right, go get it. Do I want her to get good grades? Sure. She rides horses. Do I want her to win first place? Absolutely. But I take more pride in watching people light up when she walks in a room because of how she treats people and how she treats classmates. Like, to me, that's what the Woods should be all about. And so we try and spread joy and bring generosity everywhere we go.
Great wisdom. E. Wood, at the end of every show, I like to give a Cliff Notes. And 2 Cliff Notes that I took from you today, both very impactful. The first, you said, be all in, be where your feet are. So if you're at work be all in, be where your feet are. If you're at home and you're being a dad and a husband, be all in, be where your feet are. And the second one, you just finished saying it, refresh others so you can be refreshed. Spread joy. And that's Proverbs 11:25. So thank you, brother, for the wisdom and the great advice you've given us here over the last 45 minutes. We can't thank you enough for being a part of our podcast today.
No, like I said at the start, it's an honor to be on with you guys. This is a bright spot of my day to be able to connect with you two. Big fan of the podcast. Appreciate what you're doing, the message that you guys spread in your daily lives, and then now spreading through the podcast. And I'm glad you're doing the podcast so more people can be exposed to it. So I appreciate both you guys.
No, we appreciate you. And one thing, I know this is usually our ending, but man, you've mentioned this a couple times. On our podcast, we talk about faith, talked about it on this podcast, family, talk about family, football, but finances. You've mentioned that word a couple times. And I have a question, because you went from kind of, people might call it like unknown to first round pick to signed a big deal. And then all of a sudden, unbeknownst to you, your career ends. But you've talked about finances in different ways. What has money been for you and your family?
Man, that's a great question. And honestly, you look around and you can compare yourself to anybody. We see the salaries that some of these guys are making nowadays, and you could say, ooh. And one of the things I've tried to just strive for is contentment. Like, yes, I still want to be successful. I want to be a good steward of my money. I want to make successful investments, and I want to be paid what I deserved in broadcasting, but being content where we are. Money has provided us a certain comfort level in life to where, I remember as a kid, my parents constantly fought about money, and me and my wife don't have to fight about money. And so it provides some comfort and security. It's allowed us to be generous and make an impact, and that's really what we want to do. It's allowed us to have incredible experiences. I'm getting off the grid with the family before the season starts back up next week, and we're going out to ranch in Montana. And had I not played in the NFL, we might not be able to do those types of things. But, I just never want to let money define who I am. It's not going to be my identity. Yes, we're blessed. Do some people have more? Of course. Do some people have less? Sure. But that's not going to define how I look at anybody. But I also feel like the way we have been blessed financially, we need to be good stewards of the money. We need to be generous. We need to be generous at the church, and we need to make a kingdom impact because of the financial security that we currently have.
Amen.
And that's so good. That's so good, man. Well, Eric, we're so grateful to have you on the Sam Acho Podcast featuring Clif Marshall. I thank you for your time, effort, energy, investment. I remember watching you from afar and being like, man, there's something about this dude. I know you said that about guys that you got a chance. Like, well, what is it about this guy? And for me, you being a few years ahead of me, I'm like, man, there's something about this man. And so from one man to another, now I'm in media, but yes, as a player and all those things, it's like, dude, I respect you. And it has very little, I would say, to do with the stats or accolades as a football player, but it's the way you played the game. You talked about that return on your investment to the coaches. Like that, for me, you said I was a freshman. I wanted to have a great return. I wanted them to have a great return on their investment. That showed up. You talked about that Walter Payton Man of the Year. Like that showed up. That's stuff that I cared about as a player. Yes, Pro Bowl, first round. And then now we were doing in media. We got a chance to connect last year in Buffalo. And I mean, I don't know, 10 minutes, 30, whatever it was, but it was so refreshing to hear the way you talked about God, about money, about your family, about your career, about your future. And for those reasons, thank you. Thank you on behalf of a man, I would say a young man. We're both young men, but a man who admires you and respects you. Thank you for going all in, because it shows up in everything you do.
I really appreciate those words, Sam. That was extremely encouraging. I appreciate that, brother.
Definitely. And thank you all so much for listening to the Sam Acho Podcast. We can't wait to see you soon.